Okay. Hello, everyone. We are going to be beginning our teacher interview up here in just a minute. Hi, so I'm in the broadcast. No, I don't see you.
Oh, I can hear you. There you are.
Oh, hi. Okay, awesome. Okay,
Great.
bye.
Great. So now you know I'm going to hang up, not
Yeah.
the video call. So you're going to be able to save this too?
Yeah, it's recording.
Yay. Okay, done. Okay, shoot, fire away. Let's get these questions done.
All right. Awesome. So today, like for my class, we're talking about Education 311, which is one of the upper ed, classes we deal with. And we were asked to identify a master teacher. I have identified you as such. So I just thought up about 12 questions I'm gonna ask you, and we'll be good to go.
Sounds good.
If you're good with that.
Yep.
All right, cool. So first, I guess we'll talk about, when you were, first starting out in teaching, how did you handle or like teach or just, when you jumped into teaching, how did you handle having that classroom with like a very varied background type of deal?
I would say my first 3 to 4 years, I knew that I had a varied background, but my skills were not so sharp. I had to rely on other teachers for advice, watching other teachers,
Yeah.
working with my department chair
Right.
really helped a lot. But yeah, there were differences in ability levels, differences in motivation, background, all of the above. I was aware of them, and that awareness was, pretty, I was definitely aware, but how I addressed them got better over time. At the beginning of my career was pretty rough.
Okay. Well, that ironically, kind of worked out well. The next question I have for you is actually how have you like changed those type of methods? How have your methods in general, like how have they just changed and like morphed and developed as you've taught for more years?
That's a really good question. I would say that my biggest change would be that I would say as far as methodologies, an informed eclectic. Really looking into good methodologies that are research-based, understanding a little bit more about language acquisition and doing more research. People like Stephen Krashen and how we learn language definitely informed my practices, and staying current. Especially now with technology in the last 5 to 6 years, how we teach language has changed somewhat, I would say, for the better. We used to have to go, I don't know if you remember when you were in school, we used to have to walk all the way down to a computer lab and
Yeah.
line.
See.
Yeah, that was only a few years ago. And now with computers and one-to-one, I'm able to focus in on students and maybe work on 4 different things in the classroom that are really targeting student skill sets as opposed to kind of a one-size-fits-all day of instruction.
That's awesome. That's really great. So again, like, how do you determine, when you're saying, okay, I have like this, I can now, instead of be focused on like one idea or one subset of students, how do you make it so that, those methods are all encompassing? Like, my question is, how do you determine what methods should be used when teaching your like diverse students? I mean, and that can be anything from diverse, meaning you have, 5 different, language sets, you have a bunch of different ELLs. You could have an overly high achieving class, stuff like that.
Or mixed level class, where
Right.
we've got which George Mason does well, I think, in foreign language, that we don't have honors classes, that we've got kids from every walk of life. I would say my first and foremost thing to do is to really listen to my students and pay attention. If I notice that, an activity that I may have planned that's really technologically centered, bombed with one group of students, I can pay attention and ask, what went well or what didn't go well. And I also have some students that prefer, I know from the way they learn, they prefer paper and pencil as opposed to technology. I have other students that love doing, small groups. I think really paying attention to them, and also using outside information that I get on my kids, on my students. Every year I get my caseload for students with learning disabilities, students with 504s, and a lot of times in their goals and in goal setting meetings for IEPs as well as for 504s, I learn about my students through those interactions, like what works best for them. And the modifications a lot of times are modified to kind of hit those areas of need. So using all the information I get from them, paying really close attention to my students, and also staying current in what works.
Okay. I guess this isn't a question I have down, but I guess I'm curious, how does it work as a foreign language teacher? I mean, I'm getting a minor in Spanish, as you know.
I do know.
Yeah. But I'm not, that's not what I'm pursuing licensure area at this time. I'm pursuing history. But again, I think secondary ed teachers are in a bit of a different position, especially in the high school level, because I think there are times when they're not as likely to be in that like IEP meeting or stuff like that. Like, how do you handle, getting that information? And
actually, you know what we do? We are invited to IEP meetings many times. And our school does a very good job, I think, of rotating in and out general ed teachers, and I'm part of the general ed. Even though sometimes foreign language courses are not considered core, we definitely are part of general ed. If you don't attend the meeting, we get our IEPs now. We used to get them in paper form, and now we get them in Google Docs.
Wow,
so I have
that's great.
everything, but I'm still old school. I still print mine out. I still highlight. I go through it very carefully to make sure that it's a document that by law I'm obliged to fulfill the requirements. If it says a student has extended time, I have to be certain that every time I give an assignment that student is afforded that accommodation.
That's great.
An IEP.
Well, yeah.
There are great suggestions also for 504s for students that I've had who have 504s, which are things, again, like typical things, wait time, increasing your wait time sometimes, letting students think about it if there's a auditory processing, and being aware of that and being mindful and thoughtful. So we definitely know we learn that way. There are three ways that you're going to learn about your students. First and foremost, what are you paying attention to when you're with them? Secondly is looking for those really important key documents, IEPs, your 504s, if they're being monitored for English as a second language or English language learners, those documents. And then thirdly, the best way is to reach out to their families. If you notice that you're just not connecting or you're not understanding what's going on.
That's great.
Why don't they learn, or how can they learn better?
Awesome. So, how do you like? Maybe you've kind of touched on this to an extent, but how do you feel like your classroom like reflects the needs of your students? Like, I mean, I know like when I had you as a teacher, like I really liked the way you had like the U set up with like various desks, and you can be in the middle. Like you could be like I personally enjoyed sitting next to your desk because it was good for me to ask my random questions. But like, how do you do that? Like, how have you learned to, say, okay, well, I have a group of kids that likes moving around, or I have a group of kids that's going to stay in this seat, and stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, I think they're again reading your students very well. I also think sitting in your chair for 90 minutes for a language class is just not conducive to staying focused. So I don't know if you remember, but I'll do small group, large group activities.
Right.
Group kids, sometimes I'll give students choices with whom they want to work. Other times I'll have strategized and say, groups of 3 or 4, I'm going to have 2 who are really confident, and then maybe 1 student who is slightly struggling but social and not afraid to ask questions, and then another student is kind of in the middle of the road. I'll do grouping like that. I also try to choose activities like now. We didn't do this that much with your class, but we started something about 3 years ago called Tema del Dia, which is a speaking practice that we do every day that will simulate what students are expected to do when they take either the IB exam or the AP exam. And we start with level 2. Actually, in level 1, we've started too. So you get partnered up with somebody for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then we switch you out. So that by the time you've done, all the whole school year, you would have had a chance to work with most kids in your class. Switching groups up too, so that students have a chance not only to learn, but to establish a rapport with another one of their peers. I think that's one of the areas that it's kind of neat to watch those natural friendships occur when you give students a chance to be social, even if it's in a different language, like Spanish.
Yeah. So this is kind of like an overall question. The question is, what defines a diverse student to you? I feel like all students are diverse, I guess. Maybe that's just going to be your answer.
I would agree with you, Taylor. I think every one of us as learners bring something that's uniquely ours to the classroom, and it's my job as a kind of a coach, or as somebody who guides students to the questions, or guides students to figure out who they are, to be aware of what uniqueness they bring to the table. And I don't mean that to sound cliche, that students are special, but we all do. Every person that walks through, and in your classroom when you're a teacher, they're going to walk through your door, and they're all going to bring something that is uniquely theirs. And it's your job to find out what that is.
Awesome. Now, within that, would you say there's like do you think there are similarities within like all students? Like, is there something like a universal thing, or is there, when you start like the school year, do you say, okay, I'm going to have, students that, like, I know the George Mason High School motto is, embody, mind, body, and character, but like stuff like that. Like, do you think such a thing exists as like traits that you can like universally define, or is that, I don't know.
I would say there's some universally defined traits that learners bring, not just high school students. I think that all learners cross the threshold of your door every day, hoping that it's going to go their way. Hoping that they're going to learn something, even if they've had a lousy day or something may not. But I believe that everybody starts off with that hope of, I'm going to learn something today. Nobody walks into a classroom and says, geez, I hope I fail at this.
Well, we hope not, right?
Yeah. So, and I think being that kind kind of tapping into that on a daily basis, even when you can tell that a student may not be having a great day.
Right.
That there may have been something that happened in the class prior to yours, or something may have happened at home, that there's a way to check all of that baggage at the door and
Uh-huh.
just come into the class and have a good day and learn
Awesome.
and be kind to each other. That's a big part too. Kindness
Yeah.
goes a long way.
Yeah. Um, so how have you gone about embracing like diversity in your students like in the classroom? Um, you know, oh maybe I could have asked this later. Actually, I kind of did. Well, I mean, I'm curious. Like, how do you work in the diverse classroom? Like, I
You
guess.
know, diversity could be areas of interest,
Right.
knowing, like, being a big part of the school community and knowing what kids are doing inside your class, and then what activities they like to do outside of the class, and finding a way to bring it into classroom activities or classroom conversation in a genuine way, not in a patronizing way. I think that's important. Knowing that I have some students whose diversity might be socioeconomic, and they don't want that to be part of classroom knowledge, or our classroom community. I
Hmm.
don't know. I think there again, it all comes down to being aware of those it's not even differences. It's like looking at what makes you uniquely you, or the learner uniquely himself or herself, is
Yeah.
only going to make us a stronger class, because
Yeah.
they may not be as we may not be as different as we think we are. And then that's what I think diversity is.
Yeah. No, and I think you're onto a good thing there. I mean, I think that's a very key universal idea in teaching is we're not as different as we think, and like this idea of just we should all accept each other and like kindness is everything and all of that. But how have you seen, diversity is something that's been in our news so much recently in various formats. How have you seen like diversity embraced by your students? Like,
That's a really good question. I would say that they're the last two generations of students are uh, less less how do I say this? I think there's a color blindness that I think is great, that
yeah,
people don't even worry about color or ethnicity or race. I also think the gender differences, and because we have organizations like the Gay Straight Alliance at our school, we also have the one day every year, what is it called? The campaign,
yeah.
and the R word.
Oh yeah.
Like, we have a community where our school community does not.
I feel like, and color blindness is like a term that can be misconstrued, but I think being a George Mason alum and you being a George Mason teacher, I think you more mean like it's not people embrace that instead of like letting it separate.
Right, and
Would
that
you say?
what I'm saying that from a middle class white perspective, and that might not be the
Right.
experience of all students at my school. I don't want to make a gross generalization like that. I think there
Right.
probably are issues of race, but there again, in the classroom, it's trying to find a way to create an environment where students know that who they are is somebody that's needed, and somebody
Yeah.
that's cared about, and that they're in the classroom to learn and have a good day doing it.
Yeah.
Um, I also think for diversity that um, it's really thrown around a lot these days, celebrating diversity, and I don't really know what that means. I've been a teacher for all these years, and celebrating diversity, is it for a Spanish class? Having food and getting stuck in those cliches, those cultural cliches, like, oh yeah, well, or is it,
Dia de los Muertos.
yeah, is it all of the things?
Yeah.
I don't really, yeah, celebrating diversity. I don't know. There's something very cliche about that for me. And I know that I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying that, but I don't think it's celebrating. I think it's looking for our, knowing that we are all different, but those differences don't necessarily need to separate us.
Yeah.
What's our common humanity is what we should be talking about.
Yeah, and a celebration of common humanity. I think that would be a better thing to do. But That being said, like, I guess I am curious. Like, I mean, I know what your student population is to some extent, but how have you seen, diversity challenged in your class? Albeit like just maybe frustration, like I've been on the end of I've been the kid who didn't understand, something in Spanish and had like the rest of the class understand it. Or have the inverse situation where you have one kid who maybe doesn't speak up a lot, gets it, and the rest of the kids that are vocal, don't, and are making that kid feel bad for having that knowledge. Like, or I mean, yeah, and it goes to as far as
knowledge
like,
when knowledge is capital in that in classrooms. That's a really good question. There again, it's trying to be aware and do things not to bring negative attention to either party. Like being the quiet and not getting it right all the time, knowing that, students are gonna walk out and sometimes
right,
feel slighted or feel like they were not paid attention to in the right way, or negative attention was drawn to them because they felt that everybody else knew something and they didn't.
right,
I think, being aware, addressing the student in a very dignified and kind manner is the way to go. And not public humiliation does not work. There are a lot of people who went through schooling in the 60s and 70s where that was the method. And even, I look at my parents' generation, the way that they were educated, that there was one, or other systems of education, like in France back in the day, they would organize the classroom where the head of the class was number one, and then all the way down the row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, everybody was organized by row, and the kid who was struggling the most was seated in the last seat. There's something wrong with that. And, or giving out papers. When students would get their papers back and they were stacked, the top students got theirs first, and the students who performed worse got theirs last.
Yeah.
Those kind of knowledge, who owns knowledge hierarchies, are detrimental to a classroom.
Right. I agree.
So.
Okay. I have 2 questions left.
There we go.
So how have you seen, like, I'm just curious, and this is, can be more opinion based. How have you seen, like, the recent, just recently, I think, in the media between the events at like the University of Missouri and, or like the AP history testing of a couple years ago, or like just different ways where I think diversity and the way we teach and the way, race is interpreted and race is, handled, and, race is mishandled. Well, how have you seen that?
As a history expert, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this in the press. I think it was Texas, that the way that slavery is treated in textbooks.
Right.
I've seen a big change in that. I've also seen an awareness that there are questions that are written on standardized tests and on each teacher's test that have a cultural bias occasionally. And that you need to be aware of that as an individual teacher, not only when you're writing your own assessments, but when you're looking into doing assessments with your students, that there are, I have an example of this. Long time ago, I taught in a bilingual school, and one of the questions had to do with silos. And my students all lived in the inner city. They'd never lived outside of the inner city, and every kid in the class missed it on a practice test. And I thought, had that been the real test, they all would have missed it too, because I taught 4th grade. So they were 4th graders and they had no clue.
Right.
Because they didn't have the life experience, right? And, learning is all about making those connections to real life, doing school and doing life, and looking for those overlaps to grow knowledge. They didn't have that. They hadn't read children's books that were all about farming, and, had no clue what a silo was. So that's just kind of a little anecdote of, it does happen, and that wasn't that long ago. Okay, it was a while ago, but it does happen. And I think you really need to be cognizant of that as a teacher. And also giving different perspectives. Like if you look at how history textbooks treat difficult moments in a country's history, and you look at multiple examples of that, brings up the big question of, well, who's right?
Yeah.
Is it your perspective or, yeah. Anyway, we can get on to a big philosophical conversation about this.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you really need to be aware that it does happen, and it still does happen.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, I'm at my last question. It's just a kind of a more generic one. It doesn't have to do with diversity as much. But like, what advice do you have for pre-service, young teachers that are just starting out? I mean, teaching is a very talked about field.
Much
Education.
maligned, unfortunately, because there are a lot of great people doing good things out there. Much maligned in the press, but meh.
Right, no, I know, but people that talk about education tend to have never been in education, other than in the student's perspective. We have these Common Core standards. I mean, so many things are going on in education. I think right now is a very interesting time to be going into education because so much is going on. I think it's going to be a time for change and a time of just immense interest and all of that. But I'm just curious, I can speak from the student's perspective. I mean, obviously, I had you multiple years at George Mason High School, various formats, various Spanish levels, various extracurricular activities. So I've seen how you handle, I think you're a very, very, very excellent teacher.
Well, thank you very much.
And I know you have kids that are all, some of your own children are teachers now. So obviously your husband's a teacher. Like it's obviously it's in the Planas blood, but um, I'm just curious.
People may say you're natural at it. I don't know if you remember the Aesop's fable that we read one time in Spanish class about the crow who, the fox was at the base of the tree.
Yeah, it rings a bell.
The crow, oh, how beautiful. You've got a beautiful singing voice, a beautiful singing voice. And the crow has this big hunk of cheese in his mouth, and he opens his mouth and goes, bah! And what happens? The cheese falls out. The fox grabs the cheese and runs away.
Right.
El zorro y el cuervo, I think it was called.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, be careful, because if people start telling you when you're a pre-service teacher, when you first get into the classroom, you're a natural, don't rely on natural talent.
Yeah.
You have to work hard at it. Rely on your gut instinct, which you do have a very strong gut instinct about people. You're a good judge of people. And I'm saying you, meaning anybody who's a pre-service teacher. I also would say rely on the folks who are experts in your building, where you're going to be doing your student teaching and your actual teaching. And be that positive voice for our profession.
Yeah.
If you get into a faculty lunch or you're around people and everything is negative, you can't let that teacher who may be down in the dumps either that particular day or is just in a existential funk about their profession to influence you and bring you down. Because I think what's needed most in the classroom are smart, hard workers who know that the classroom is changing almost faster than we can keep up with it. Right. And I would also say, be prepared for radical change. And by radical change, I think that ownership of knowledge with technology, who owns knowing, has changed immensely.
Yeah.
And I also think that the classroom, the way it's set up now, post-industrial style of learning, is going to look very different within the next 5 to 10 years. It's already started.
Yeah.
Asynchronous learning, is the classroom, are we going to have to go bell to bell? All of that is changing very, very quickly. And just buckle up.
Yeah.
And enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
And it is a great ride. I mean, there's nothing better. Nothing better. Awesome. Here's being a teacher. May the force be with you.
Well, I guess since you are my master teacher, I guess I should say thank you, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, Luke. Well, thank you, and I'm honored that you would think that, because I'm not a master. Anyway, I need another cup of tea. Thank you very much, and have a great time the last couple of weeks of school, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. Thank you so much for the interview. I really appreciate it. I'm sure my classmates are going to enjoy watching it.
Oh, you're going to show them this? Oh, I should have put some makeup on, some lipstick.
I don't know. It's up to them. I'm just kidding.
You can do, what is it? Paz, amor y armonía.
Yeah, exactly. Exactamente.
All right. Cuídate mucho y te veo dentro de 3 semanas. 2 semanas, 3 semanas.
2 semanas, sí.
Okay.
Nos vemos.
Perfecto. Nos vemos. Chao. Gracias por la llamada.
Sí, gracias. Tú también.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. How do I hang up?
Yeah.
Oh, there's my little thing. Bye.
Bye. Stop broadcasting.